The Nevada sun blazed mercilessly across the tarmac at Naval Air Station Fallon, casting razor-sharp shadows between the gleaming F-35 Lightning II fighters. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the flight line, her flight bags slung over one shoulder, watching a group of Top Gun pilots gather around their assigned aircraft like predators claiming territory. Their conversations buzzed with the electric confidence of aviators who'd never been told they didn't belong in the sky. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah's boots had walked across more flight decks and tarmacs than most of these pilots had seen in their combined careers. Her helmet bore the scuffs and scratches of someone who'd earned every hour in her logbook through skilled determination, and an unwavering refusal to accept limitations others tried to impose on her. Yet here at the most prestigious fighter weapons school in the world, she found herself on the outside looking in, relegated to observer status while others prepared for the advanced combat training that should have been hers by right. The irony cut deep. She was one of the most experienced F-35 pilots in the entire Navy, with more combat sorties and tactical knowledge than half the instructors at Fallon combined. Her record spoke of precision strikes, successful missions, and the kind of split-second decision-making that separated great pilots from merely good ones. But for the past 8 months, that record had been gathering dust while she endured what Commander Ryan Blackwood diplomatically termed administrative review the morning. Briefing room at the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center hummed with the focused energy of America's finest naval aviators. Sarah sat in the back row, her notebook open but her pen still, as Commander Ryan Blackwood delivered his opening remarks to the latest class of Top Gun candidates. His voice carried the authoritative tone of someone who'd built his reputation as much on politics as on flying skills, commanding attention through position rather than respect. Blackwood was everything the Navy loved in a public face: polished, articulate, and photogenic enough for recruiting videos. His uniform was always immaculate, his record carefully curated to highlight victories while obscuring the times he'd chosen safer assignments over challenging ones. Sarah had served under his command for 18 months, watching him accept credit for mission successes while ensuring that any failures landed on other shoulders. The man understood the game of naval aviation politics better than anyone she'd encountered, which explained how he'd managed to secure one of the most coveted positions in military aviation despite having never faced the kind of genuine combat pressure that forged truly exceptional pilots. Sarah's presence in the briefing room was technically authorized. She was assigned as a program observer, while her fitness for flight status underwent what Blackwood had described as routine evaluation. The reality was more complex and far more frustrating. 8 months earlier, during a combat mission over Afghanistan, Sarah had made a tactical decision that saved civilian lives, but deviated from mission parameters. The decision had been vindicated by post-mission analysis, praised by ground commanders, and recommended for commendation by her immediate superiors. Somehow, by the time the paperwork reached Blackwood's desk, the narrative had shifted to questions about her judgment and adherence to protocol. The systematic erosion of her standing had been subtle but devastating. Prime mission assignments went to other pilots, training opportunities were quietly redistributed, and her input during tactical planning sessions was politely acknowledged and promptly ignored. Blackwood had perfected the art of sidelining inconvenient subordinates without creating obvious grounds for complaint or appeal. Sarah found herself assigned to increasingly peripheral duties while watching less experienced pilots advance past her toward the elite training she'd earned the right to receive. Lieutenant Jake Harrison stood near the front of the briefing room, his flight suit crisp and his confidence unmistakable. Harrison was Blackwood's current favorite, a pilot whose aggressive flying style and willingness to follow orders without question had earned him opportunities that should have gone to more qualified aviators. He was skilled enough to handle advanced aircraft and politically astute enough to never challenge his superiors' decisions, making him the perfect protege for someone like Blackwood. Sarah had watched Harrison's rapid advancement with the bitter recognition that competence alone wasn't enough to succeed in an environment where personal loyalty often trumped professional merit. The assignment board near the briefing room entrance displayed the day's training schedule, a document that had become a daily reminder of Sarah's marginalized status. 8 primary training flights were listed, all assigned to pilots with less experience and fewer qualifications than she possessed. Advanced combat maneuvering, weapons systems integration, electronic warfare scenarios, every aspect of training she should have been leading rather than observing from the sidelines. The board represented not just missed opportunities, but a systematic denial of her professional development and career advancement. Harrison approached her position with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never had to question his place in the hierarchy. His smile carried the particular brand of condescension that came from knowing he held advantages beyond mere skill or qualification. Sarah had encountered that expression countless times throughout her career, worn by men who seemed genuinely puzzled by her presence in spaces they considered their natural domain. "Still studying the board, Mitchell?" Harrison's tone suggested amusement rather than genuine curiosity. "You know, there might be some administrative work that needs attention in the operations center. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Probably more suited to your current skill set than actual flying." The comment landed with the precision of someone who'd calculated exactly how to inflict maximum psychological damage while maintaining plausible deniability. Sarah had developed thick skin during her years in naval aviation, but Harrison's words touched on her deepest professional fears, that perhaps she really had lost whatever edge had once made her exceptional, that her forced inactivity had somehow diminished her capabilities beyond recovery. "I'm keeping current on tactical developments," Sarah replied evenly, refusing to give Harrison the satisfaction of a visible reaction. Someone needs to understand what's happening in the real world of combat aviation, even if they're not currently participating in training exercises. Harrison's laugh held no warmth or genuine humor. "Combat aviation has evolved, Mitchell. The F-35 isn't your grandfather's fighter jet. It requires pilots who understand modern systems integration, network-centric warfare, and adaptive tactical thinking. Maybe it's time to consider whether you're keeping up with the evolution of aerial combat." The dismissal stung more than Sarah wanted to admit, particularly because it echoed doubts she'd been fighting in her own mind during months of forced inactivity. The F-35 Lightning II was indeed a revolutionary aircraft, representing a fundamental shift in how fighter aviation approached modern warfare. But Sarah knew that aircraft better than almost anyone in the Navy. She'd been among the first pilots to transition to the platform, had helped develop tactical procedures that were now standard throughout the fleet, and possessed an intuitive understanding of its capabilities that came from hundreds of hours of actual combat experience rather than classroom theory. Master Chief Tony Rodriguez had been watching the exchange from across the room, his expression growing increasingly uncomfortable as Harrison continued his verbal assault. Rodriguez had been maintaining Navy aircraft for 22 years, had worked with hundreds of pilots, and possessed the kind of institutional knowledge that came from seeing careers rise and fall based on both merit and politics. He'd been observing Sarah's treatment with growing concern, recognizing patterns he'd seen before when talented aviators found themselves on the wrong side of command politics. Rodriguez approached after Harrison moved away, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd decided to take a risk for the sake of doing what was right. His weathered face reflected years of desert sun and carrier deck operations, and his eyes held the steady confidence of someone who'd earned respect through competence rather than rank. That whole situation is complete nonsense, Rodriguez said quietly, offering Sarah one of the coffee cups. I've been working on these aircraft since before most of these hotshots knew what a flight suit looked like. I've seen your maintenance records, Mitchell. I've seen your mission reports from Afghanistan. You should be instructing these classes, not sitting in the back row watching less qualified pilots get opportunities you've earned 10 times over. The validation from Rodriguez meant more to Sarah than she could easily express. Maintenance. Chiefs like Rodriguez were the institutional memory of naval aviation, respected by pilots and commanders alike for their technical expertise and unvarnished honesty. When a master chief said you were being treated unfairly, it carried weight that transcended normal military hierarchy. Blackwood has his reasons, Sarah said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. The review process exists for good reasons. Maybe I need to prove that I can still perform at the level required for advanced training. Rodriguez shook his head with the firmness of someone who'd seen too many talented people talk themselves into accepting injustice. Blackwood has his favorites, and his reasons usually involve keeping certain people visible while making others disappear. The question is how long you're going to let him define your worth based on his political calculations rather than your demonstrated capabilities. Through the briefing room windows, they could see the flight line where ground crews were conducting final preparations on the F-35s that would be used for the day's advanced training missions. The aircraft represented the cutting edge of military aviation technology, each one a testament to American engineering excellence and tactical innovation. Sarah had logged more hours in F-35s than most of the pilots preparing to fly them, had pushed the aircraft to its limits in combat situations these training exercises could only simulate. Rodriguez lowered his voice, glancing around to ensure their conversation remained private. I heard something interesting from the communications center this morning. There's been unusual radio traffic from Forward Operating Base Chapman in Afghanistan. Sounds like a Marine unit got cut off during a reconnaissance patrol, and they're requesting immediate close air support. The Taliban apparently surrounded them in some pretty rough terrain. Sarah felt something stir in her chest, the familiar quickening that came whenever she heard about fellow service members in danger. Combat search and rescue, close air support for endangered ground troops. These were the missions that had defined her career and demonstrated her capabilities under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Chapman is pretty remote, Sarah said, her mind automatically calculating distances, response times, and tactical considerations. That's rough country for ground operations. If Marines are cut off out there, they're going to need immediate air support to have any chance of extraction. Rodriguez nodded grimly. 200 Marines, according to the initial reports. They were conducting a routine patrol when they got ambushed by a much larger Taliban force. Now they're pinned down in a valley with limited ammunition and no clear escape route. The Taliban apparently learned about the patrol in advance and set up a pretty sophisticated trap. The tactical situation was exactly the kind of complex, high-stakes scenario that separated competent pilots from truly exceptional ones. Sarah's mind raced through possible approaches, aircraft capabilities, weapons loadouts, and coordination requirements. This wasn't a training exercise with predetermined parameters and safety margins. This was the real world of combat aviation, where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death for American service members. And Blackwood's response? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Rodriguez's expression darkened. He's treating it like a standard training opportunity. Assigned Harrison and 2 other Top Gun candidates to fly a simulated close air support mission using the Chapman scenario as a tactical exercise. They'll be practicing on the range while real Marines are fighting for their lives halfway around the world. The disconnect between training exercises and actual combat requirements had always frustrated Sarah. But this situation represented something far worse than routine bureaucratic inefficiency. American Marines were in mortal danger, requiring immediate assistance from pilots capable of operating effectively in the complex tactical environment of modern asymmetric warfare. Instead of deploying experienced combat aviators, Blackwood was using the crisis as a training scenario for pilots who'd never faced genuine life-and-death pressure. Sarah looked across the briefing room at the assembled Top Gun candidates, recognizing the enthusiasm and confidence of aviators who'd excelled in controlled training environments, but had never been tested by the brutal realities of actual combat. They were skilled and dedicated, but skill developed in safe training scenarios didn't automatically translate to effectiveness when lives hung in the balance, and there were no second chances for mistakes. Those Marines deserve better than a training exercise, Sarah said quietly, the words carrying implications that both she and Rodriguez understood perfectly. Rodriguez studied her expression with the careful attention of someone who'd seen numerous pivotal moments in military careers. There's something else you should know. I've been reviewing aircraft availability and pilot qualifications. Technically, you're still current and qualified on the F-35. And there happens to be one aircraft that's mission-ready but not assigned to today's training exercises. The implication hung in the air between them like a challenge and an opportunity, rolled into one. Sarah understood exactly what Rodriguez was suggesting, and the enormity of the decision before her. Taking unauthorized action would almost certainly end her career, but failing to act might cost the lives of 200 fellow service members who deserved every possible chance for survival. Sarah walked to the window and stared out at the F-35 Lightning II, sitting alone at the far end of the flight line. The aircraft seemed to beckon her, its sleek profile representing both the culmination of her professional expertise and potentially the instrument of her career's destruction. She'd spent years mastering every aspect of that machine, understanding its capabilities and limitations with the intimacy that came from countless hours of training and combat experience. The choice crystallized in her mind with sudden, absolute clarity. She could continue sitting in briefing rooms, watching others receive opportunities she'd earned, accepting Blackwood's systematic marginalization while American Marines died, waiting for support that might never come. Or she could remember why she'd become a naval aviator in the first place, to serve her country and protect fellow service members who depended on her skills and dedication. Rodriguez, Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying the steady resolve of someone who'd made a decision that would change everything. What would happen if someone were to conduct an emergency readiness check on that F-35, just to ensure it's properly maintained and flight-ready for potential deployment? Rodriguez's smile was slow and knowing, the expression of someone who'd been hoping to hear exactly those words. Well, as maintenance chief, I'd certainly want to ensure that aircraft is fully operational. And if a qualified pilot happened to be available to conduct a comprehensive systems check, including engine performance and avionics functionality, I'd consider that due diligence. Sarah nodded, understanding passing between them without need for further explanation. For the first time in 8 months, she felt like she was walking toward her destiny rather than away from it. The F-35 was waiting, and so were 200 Marines who needed someone willing to risk everything to give them a fighting chance. Sarah's flight suit hung in locker 47 like a patient friend waiting for reunion. The familiar weight of the fabric, worn soft from countless missions, felt like slipping back into her own skin after months of uncomfortable civilian clothes and administrative uniforms. Every pocket held memories, the pen that had signed off on successful mission reports, the small notebook containing tactical observations from combat zones, the lucky coin her father had given her before her first deployment. These weren't just pieces of equipment. They were the accumulated tools of a warrior who'd proven herself in the most demanding environments military aviation could offer. The mirror reflected someone she barely recognized after 8 months of forced inactivity. Her eyes still held the sharp focus that had guided precision strikes through enemy territory. But there was something else now, a hunger that came from being denied the opportunity to exercise the skills that defined her professional identity. Sarah had always understood that naval aviation was more than a career. It was a calling that demanded everything she had to give in exchange for the privilege of serving at the highest levels of military excellence. Her hands moved through the familiar ritual of suiting up with practiced efficiency, each motion automatic yet deliberate. The G-suit connections, communications equipment, survival gear, every component had its place and purpose, representing years of training and refinement. This wasn't just getting dressed. It was transforming from an observer into an operator, from someone who watched others fly to someone who could push an F-35 Lightning II to its absolute limits in service of American forces in danger. The maintenance hangar buzzed with the controlled chaos of flight preparation, but Sarah moved through it with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged in this environment, despite months of being told otherwise. Rodriguez had prepared everything with the meticulous attention to detail that made him legendary among pilots who understood the difference between adequate maintenance and the kind of perfectionist care that could mean survival in combat situations. The F-35C sat under the harsh fluorescent lights like a technological masterpiece waiting to demonstrate its capabilities. Sarah approached the aircraft with reverence mixed with professional assessment, her trained eye automatically cataloging every surface, connection, and component. This particular Lightning II bore the hull number 168,723, an aircraft she'd flown before during her previous assignment, but never under circumstances that carried such personal and professional stakes. Pre-flight inspection revealed an aircraft in perfect condition, every system optimized for maximum performance. Rodriguez had clearly spent considerable time ensuring that Sarah would have no mechanical limitations if she chose to push the aircraft beyond normal training parameters. The weapon systems were configured for air-to-ground operations, the fuel load calculated for extended range operations, and the electronic warfare suite updated with the latest threat identification protocols. Sarah sealed the canopy and initiated startup procedures. The twin-engine F-135 power plant, responding with the smooth efficiency that represented decades of engineering refinement. The aircraft systems came online with the familiar sequence of lights, displays, and confirmations that had become second nature through hundreds of previous flights. But this time felt different, charged with significance that went far beyond routine training or even normal combat operations. Her radio crackled with increasingly urgent communications from the command center as controllers realized that an unauthorized aircraft was conducting startup procedures without clearance or mission assignment. Blackwood's voice cut through the frequency traffic with the sharp authority of someone whose control was being challenged in the most public way possible. Lightning 723, you are not authorized for startup. Shut down immediately and report to base operations. Blackwood's tone carried barely controlled fury, mixed with disbelief that his authority was being so blatantly challenged. Sarah keyed her radio with steady calm that belied the magnitude of what she was about to undertake. Base operations. Lightning 723, conducting emergency systems verification in response to urgent tactical requirements. Will advise status upon completion of evaluation. The response was immediate and predictable. Negative 723. You are ordered to shut down immediately. This is a direct order from your commanding officer. Sarah switched off her radio and continued her pre-flight sequence. She'd crossed the line from insubordination to open defiance, but the image of 200 Marines fighting for survival in Afghanistan had crystallized her priorities with absolute clarity. Sometimes the most important military decisions required choosing between conflicting loyalties, obedience to immediate superiors versus service to fellow Americans who needed her capabilities more than anyone else could provide. The taxiway stretched ahead like a pathway between her current constrained existence and the unlimited potential that had originally drawn her to naval aviation. Sarah pushed the throttles forward and felt the F-35 respond with eager power, its advanced systems seamlessly integrating her inputs with computer-assisted flight controls, designed to maximize both performance and safety. Ground personnel watched with expressions ranging from admiration to concern as Sarah taxied toward the active runway without clearance or authorization. Several maintenance technicians actually applauded, recognizing the courage required to risk everything for the chance to serve at the highest level. Others looked worried, understanding that careers could be destroyed by the kind of decisive action Sarah was demonstrating. Rodriguez stood near the maintenance facility, his arms crossed and a satisfied expression on his weathered face. He'd spent 2 decades watching talented people get marginalized by political considerations rather than evaluated on their actual capabilities. Seeing Sarah take control of her destiny represented validation of everything he believed about merit-based advancement and the importance of supporting excellence regardless of bureaucratic obstacles. Blackwood emerged from the operations center. At a near run, his face flushed with anger and what might have been panic. He'd built his career on maintaining control over every aspect of his command, and Sarah's actions represented a fundamental challenge to the authority structure he'd carefully constructed. Several other officers followed him, including Harrison, who looked simultaneously shocked and grudgingly impressed by the boldness of Sarah's decision. The radio crackled with increasingly desperate attempts to establish communication as controllers tried to understand how an unauthorized aircraft had reached the runway threshold without proper clearance. Sarah could hear the confusion in their voices, the breakdown of normal procedures that occurred when someone acted outside established protocols for reasons that transcended routine training requirements. Sarah lined up on the runway centerline and paused for what might be her final moment as a naval aviator. Everything she'd worked for during 15 years of service hung in the balance, but so did the lives of Marines who deserved every possible chance for survival. The choice was clear, even if the consequences were potentially devastating. She pushed the throttles to military power and felt the F-35 accelerate down the runway with authority that pressed her back into the ejection seat. The aircraft lifted, off with the confident ease of a machine designed for exactly this kind of demanding operation, climbing rapidly into the Nevada sky that suddenly seemed filled with unlimited possibilities. Below, Blackwood stood frozen as his perfect training schedule dissolved into chaos. Harrison watched the F-35 disappear into the distance with an expression that mixed professional respect with personal concern for his own position in the hierarchy. Rodriguez simply smiled and walked back into the maintenance hangar, satisfied that the right pilot was finally flying the right mission. The communication center at Fallon buzzed with urgent activity as news of Sarah's unauthorized departure spread through the chain of command. Colonel Maria Santos, the Marine Corps liaison officer, had been monitoring the situation from her temporary office, and she approached the operations center with the purposeful stride of someone who'd spent her career managing crisis situations. Santos had been following the Chapman situation through Marine Corps channels, and she understood better than anyone the desperate circumstances facing the surrounded reconnaissance unit. 200 Marines were pinned down in hostile territory with diminishing ammunition and no clear escape route, while Taliban forces positioned themselves for what appeared to be a coordinated assault designed to inflict maximum casualties on American forces. "Commander Blackwood," Santos said as she entered the operations center, "I understand we have a pilot en route to provide close air support for the Chapman situation." Blackwood turned to face her with barely controlled frustration. "Colonel, we have an unauthorized aircraft that stole a multi-million-dollar fighter jet in direct violation of orders. This is a disciplinary matter, not a tactical deployment." Santos studied the tactical display showing F-35 tracking information and communication intercepts from the Chapman area. Her expression grew increasingly serious as she absorbed the scope of the crisis facing the Marine unit. "Commander, with respect, those Marines don't care about your disciplinary procedures. They need immediate air support from someone capable of operating effectively in complex tactical environments." The exchange crystallized everything that was wrong with Blackwood's approach to command. He was focused on maintaining personal authority and procedural compliance while American service members faced life-and-death situations that required immediate, decisive action from the most qualified personnel available. Santos represented a different kind of leadership, one that prioritized mission accomplishment and troop welfare over bureaucratic considerations. Harrison stepped forward with the calculated boldness of someone sensing an opportunity to advance his own interests. "Colonel Santos, I'm current and qualified on the F-35, and I've been training specifically for close air support missions. I could be airborne in 15 minutes with full authorization and proper mission parameters." The offer was technically sound, but fundamentally flawed in ways that Santos recognized immediately. Harrison possessed the basic qualifications for F-35 operations, but he lacked the combat experience and tactical judgment required for the kind of complex, high-stakes mission that the Chapman situation represented. Training exercises, no matter how realistic, couldn't replicate the psychological pressure and split-second decision-making demands of actual combat operations. "Lieutenant Harrison," Santos replied diplomatically, "I appreciate your willingness to serve, but this situation requires someone with extensive combat experience in similar tactical environments. The Marines at Chapman are facing a sophisticated enemy force in terrain that doesn't allow for mistakes or learning curves." Blackwood's face darkened as he realized that Santos was implicitly supporting Sarah's unauthorized mission, despite its flagrant violation of military protocol. The Marine colonel was evaluating the situation based on tactical requirements rather than procedural compliance, representing exactly the kind of results-oriented thinking that threatened Blackwood's authority-based leadership style. "Colonel, I cannot support unauthorized military operations regardless of the tactical situation," Blackwood said with forced calm. "We have procedures for crisis response, and those procedures exist for good reasons. I'm ordering immediate recall of that aircraft and disciplinary action against Captain Mitchell for theft of military property." Santos studied Blackwood with the cool assessment of someone who'd spent her career distinguishing between leaders and managers. "Commander, I'll be monitoring this situation closely and reporting directly to Marine Corps leadership about the response to our personnel in danger. I trust that all decisions will prioritize the welfare of American service members over administrative considerations." The implicit threat was clear and professionally delivered. Santos was putting Blackwood on notice that his handling of the crisis would be evaluated by senior leaders who cared more about results than procedures. If American Marines died while Blackwood focused on disciplinary action rather than tactical support, there would be consequences that extended far beyond his immediate command. The Tactical Communications Center received an encrypted transmission from Forward Operating Base Chapman that changed everything. The Marine unit's situation had deteriorated rapidly, with Taliban forces tightening their encirclement and preparing for what appeared to be a final coordinated assault. The unit commander's voice carried the controlled desperation of someone who understood that survival now depended on immediate external intervention. Any station, this is Viper 6. We are in contact with approximately 400 enemy personnel in prepared positions. We have taken casualties and are running low on ammunition. Request immediate close air support, over." The numbers were staggering and tactically terrifying. 400 Taliban fighters represented a force large enough to overwhelm the Marine unit through sheer numerical superiority, even without considering the advantages of prepared positions and intimate knowledge of local terrain. This wasn't a routine patrol contact. It was a carefully planned ambush designed to inflict maximum casualties on American forces. Santos immediately stepped forward to respond, her authority as Marine Corps' liaison giving her precedence in communications with the endangered unit. Viper 6, this is Falcon Base. We have fast mover inbound to your position. Authenticate your grid coordinates and provide target priorities. The response came back immediately with the crisp professionalism of Marines under extreme pressure. Falcon Base, Viper 6. Grid coordinates authenticated. Priority targets are heavy weapons positions on ridgeline, north of our position, and mortar crews in valley approaches. We are marked with orange smoke. Danger close authorization granted for all strikes. Danger close authorization represented the most serious possible request for air support, indicating that friendly forces were so desperate that they were willing to accept the risk of casualties from their own supporting fires. It was a tactical situation that demanded absolute precision and complete trust between ground forces and supporting aircraft, the kind of coordination that could only be achieved by pilots with extensive combat experience and proven judgment. Under pressure, Blackwood stared at the tactical display with growing comprehension of what was happening. This wasn't a training exercise or routine deployment. It was a genuine combat emergency requiring immediate response from whatever assets were available. Sarah's unauthorized departure was beginning to look less like insubordination and more like the kind of decisive action that saved American lives in crisis situations. The operations center fell silent as everyone present absorbed the magnitude of what was unfolding. 200 Marines were fighting for survival against overwhelming odds, depending on air support that might or might not arrive in time to prevent a catastrophic defeat. Sarah was flying toward that battle in an aircraft she'd taken without authorization, risking her career for fellow service members she'd never met but was sworn to protect. Harrison's expression shifted from confident ambition to something approaching humility as he realized the true scope of the tactical challenge. The Chapman situation wasn't a training scenario with predetermined parameters and safety margins. It was the kind of complex, high-stakes combat operation that separated competent pilots from truly exceptional ones. His classroom knowledge and simulator experience suddenly seemed inadequate preparation for the life-and-death decisions that Sarah would face in the next few hours. Rodriguez appeared in the operations center carrying a thick folder of maintenance records and technical documentation. His presence represented the practical, no-nonsense perspective of someone who'd spent decades ensuring that aircraft and pilots were prepared for exactly these kinds of demanding missions. "Colonel Santos," Rodriguez said respectfully, "I thought you might want to review Captain Mitchell's maintenance history and combat performance records. She's logged more F-35 combat hours than any other pilot in the Navy, with a perfect mission completion rate and 0 incidents attributable to pilot error." The documentation Rodriguez provided painted a picture of sustained excellence that contradicted everything Blackwood had been saying about Sarah's supposed deficiencies. Combat mission reports, maintenance logs, and performance evaluations all told the same story. Sarah was exactly the kind of pilot the Marines at Chapman needed. Someone with the experience and judgment to operate effectively in the most demanding tactical environments. Santos reviewed the records with growing appreciation for Sarah's qualifications and growing skepticism about Blackwood's judgment in sidelining such an obviously capable aviator. The disconnect between Sarah's documented performance and her current marginalized status suggested either gross incompetence or deliberate bias in the command's personnel decisions. "Commander Blackwood," Santos said carefully, "these records indicate that Captain Mitchell has extensive experience in exactly the kind of complex air support missions that the Chapman situation requires. I'm curious about your decision to exclude her from advanced training and combat assignments." The question hung in the air like an accusation, challenging Blackwood to justify his treatment of Sarah in light of overwhelming evidence of her competence and experience. The Operations Center staff watched with barely concealed interest as their commanding officer struggled to Provide a rational explanation for decisions that appeared increasingly indefensible. Blackwood's response revealed everything wrong with his leadership approach. Colonel, personnel decisions are based on comprehensive evaluations that go beyond simple metrics. Captain Mitchell has shown patterns of independent decision-making that raise questions about her ability to function effectively within established command structures. The euphemism was transparent and damning. Blackwood was essentially admitting that he'd marginalized Sarah not because of performance deficiencies, but because she'd demonstrated the kind of independent thinking and decisive leadership that threatened his authority-based management style. Santos recognized the dynamic immediately, having encountered similar situations throughout her own career in environments where insecure leaders felt threatened by competent subordinates. The tactical situation display updated with new information from Chapman, showing the deteriorating position of the Marine unit as Taliban forces continued their encirclement. Time was running out for any air support to be effective, and everyone in the operations center understood that the next few hours would determine whether 200 Americans came home alive or became casualties of bureaucratic dysfunction and command failure. Sarah's F-35 appeared on long-range tracking displays as she crossed into Afghan airspace, flying at maximum sustainable speed toward coordinates that represented life and death for fellow service members she'd never met. Her unauthorized mission had evolved from an act of personal defiance into something far more significant, a test of whether merit and dedication could triumph over politics and procedural orthodoxy when American lives hung in the balance. The communications equipment crackled with intercepts from Taliban radio traffic, translated by intelligence specialists who painted an increasingly grim picture of the tactical situation. The enemy force was larger and better organized than initial reports had suggested, with heavy weapons, mortar, and sophisticated coordination that indicated careful planning and extensive preparation for this ambush. Santos studied the intelligence summaries with growing concern and grudging admiration for Sarah's decision to risk everything for fellow service members facing impossible odds. The Marine colonel had spent her career in environments where courage and competence mattered more than politics and procedural compliance, and she recognized those same qualities in Sarah's unauthorized mission to Chapman. "Commander," Santos said quietly, "I suggest we focus our efforts on supporting Captain Mitchell's mission rather than planning disciplinary action. Those Marines need every possible advantage, and she's the most qualified pilot available to provide it." The words carried implications that everyone present understood perfectly. Santos was essentially ordering Blackwood to prioritize mission success over personal authority, challenging him to demonstrate the kind of leadership that put troop welfare ahead of bureaucratic considerations. The next few hours would reveal whether Blackwood possessed the moral courage to support excellence even when it challenged his personal control, or whether his commitment to procedural compliance would cost American lives in the most tragic possible way. The third wave of Taliban fighters emerged from concealed positions along the eastern approaches to the Marine perimeter, their movement coordinated with the precision that had characterized the entire ambush operation. Sarah's tactical display showed approximately 150 enemy personnel advancing under cover of suppressive fire from remaining heavy weapons positions, their assault timed to exploit what they assumed would be gaps in American defensive capabilities. Sarah banked her F-35 into a sharp turn that brought her aircraft perpendicular to the enemy advance, her maneuver calculated to maximize weapons effectiveness while minimizing exposure to ground-based air defense systems that intelligence had identified throughout the operational area. The Lightning II responded to her inputs with the seamless integration of human skill and technological capability that represented the pinnacle of modern fighter aircraft development. Viper 6, Lightning 7-3 observes large enemy formation advancing from eastern ridgeline. Approximately 150 personnel with supporting weapons. Request immediate clearance for area suppression fires along designated axis of advance. The ground commander's response came back with the controlled urgency of someone managing multiple, simultaneous threats while trying to keep his Marines alive through superior firepower and tactical coordination. Lightning Viper 6, you are cleared hot for area suppression. Friendlies are marked with strobes and will remain in covered positions. Enemy formation is fair game for maximum ordnance. Expenditure. Sarah's weapon systems displayed a full complement of precision-guided munitions, specifically configured for the kind of close air support mission that the Chapman situation demanded. Her aircraft carried a mixture of small-diameter bombs for precision targeting and larger ordnance for area suppression, providing flexibility to engage everything from individual fighting positions to large formations of enemy personnel moving in the open. The attack run required flying directly over the most dangerous portion of the battlefield, exposing her aircraft to concentrated small arms fire and possible surface-to-air missile engagement from enemy forces who understood that eliminating American air support was crucial to the success of their assault. Sarah's approach profile balanced aggressive positioning with survivability considerations, using terrain masking and electronic warfare capabilities to minimize her vulnerability while maximizing weapons effectiveness. Her first salvo of precision munitions impacted along the enemy formation's axis of advance with devastating accuracy, creating a wall of explosions that shattered the Taliban assault before it could reach effective range of the Marine defensive positions. Secondary explosions from enemy ammunition and weapons indicated that her strikes had eliminated not just personnel, but also the heavy weapons that had been supporting the coordinated attack. The tactical communications frequency erupted with excited transmissions from the Marine ground commander as the immediate threat to his perimeter dissolved under Sarah's precision fires. Outstanding, Lightning. Eastern approach neutralized. Enemy forces are breaking contact and withdrawing to alternate positions. You've bought us breathing room to reorganize our defensive perimeter. Sarah's fuel and ammunition status remained adequate for continued operations, but she understood that the tactical situation was far from resolved. Intelligence intercepts indicated that Taliban forces were regrouping for another coordinated assault, this time approaching from multiple directions simultaneously to overwhelm her ability to provide effective defensive fires for all threatened sectors. The operations center at Fallon tracked every aspect of Sarah's performance through real-time data links that provided unprecedented visibility into modern combat operations. Her weapons expenditure, flight profile, communication procedures, and tactical decision-making were being recorded and analyzed by staff members who recognized they were witnessing exceptional combat aviation performance under the most demanding possible circumstances. Colonel Santos maintained continuous coordination between Sarah and the endangered Marine unit while simultaneously managing communications with higher headquarters that were becoming increasingly interested in the unauthorized mission that was achieving remarkable tactical success. Her position as Marine Corps liaison gave her unique authority to advocate for continued support of Sarah's operations, despite their irregular nature. Commander Blackwood, Santos said during a brief lull in tactical communications, I'm receiving inquiries from Marine Corps leadership about the air support being provided to our forces at Chapman. They're expressing strong appreciation for the effectiveness of the response, and they're asking specific questions about the pilot and aircraft involved. The implication was clear and potentially career-defining for Blackwood. Senior Marine Corps leadership was taking notice of Sarah's performance, and their evaluation would be based entirely on results rather than procedural compliance. If the mission succeeded in saving American lives, Sarah's unauthorized actions would likely be viewed as heroic initiative rather than insubordination. Blackwood studied the tactical displays with growing comprehension of how completely the Chapman crisis was exposing the flaws in his leadership approach. He'd marginalized one of the most capable pilots under his command, based on personal authority considerations, rather than professional competence. And that decision was now being tested against life-and-death tactical requirements that demanded exactly the kind of experience and judgment Sarah possessed. Harrison watched Sarah's performance with expressions that shifted between professional admiration and personal introspection as he realized the enormous gap between training exercises and actual combat operations. His confidence in his own abilities remained genuine, but it was being recalibrated by realistic assessment of what was required to operate effectively when American lives depended on split-second tactical decisions under extreme pressure. Intelligence. Analysts provided updated assessments of enemy capabilities and intentions based on intercepted communications and observed tactical behavior. The Taliban commander was demonstrating sophisticated understanding of combined arms operations, using mortar, heavy weapons, and coordinated infantry assault in ways that suggested extensive military training and detailed knowledge of American tactical procedures. The enemy force is larger and better organized than initial intelligence indicated, reported the senior analyst. We're now estimating total enemy strength at approximately 500 personnel with supporting weapons and what appears to be at least limited air defense capability. This represents a significant threat to any supporting aircraft operating in the area. The numbers were sobering and tactically challenging, representing enemy strength that could overwhelm the Marine unit through numerical superiority, even without considering advantages of terrain familiarity and prepared defensive positions. Sarah's continued effectiveness would be crucial not just for immediate tactical success but for the long-term survival of American forces in increasingly desperate circumstances. Sarah's voice cut through the operational chatter with another situation report that demonstrated her comprehensive understanding of the evolving tactical picture. Falcon Base, Lightning 723. Enemy forces are repositioning for renewed assault from multiple directions. I'm observing movement consistent with coordinated attack preparation from north, east, and southwest approaches simultaneously. The tactical assessment revealed the sophistication of the enemy plan and the magnitude of the challenge facing both Sarah and the surrounded Marines. A coordinated assault from 3 directions would stretch her ability to provide effective defensive fires while testing the Marine unit's capacity to maintain perimeter integrity under simultaneous pressure from multiple sectors. Santos responded with the kind of calm professionalism that provided psychological reassurance to forces operating under extreme stress. Lightning 723, Falcon Base copies multi-axis threat assessment. Ground Commander reports ammunition status critical and requests priority suppression of northern approach heavy weapons positions. The ammunition shortage facing the Marine unit elevated the importance of Sarah's air support from helpful to absolutely critical for survival. Without adequate small arms ammunition to maintain defensive fires, the Marines would be completely dependent on air support to break up enemy assault formations before they could close to effective range. Sarah's tactical display showed the northern ridge positions that had been reconstituted with fresh personnel and equipment after her earlier strikes, indicating that Taliban forces possess sufficient depth and organization to rapidly replace combat losses and maintain offensive pressure despite taking significant casualties from air attacks. Viper 6, Lightning 723 beginning attack run on northern positions. Recommend all personnel maintain maximum cover during danger. Close engagement. Time on target in 30 seconds. Her approach required flying directly over the most heavily defended portion of the battlefield while maintaining sufficient altitude to ensure weapons accuracy and minimize risk of fratricide from her own ordnance. The flight profile demanded perfect coordination between pilot skill, aircraft capability, and weapons system performance under conditions that provided no margin for error. The explosions that followed Sarah's weapons release echoed across the Afghan mountains with the authority of precision, munitions delivered by someone who understood exactly how to maximize their tactical effect. Her targeting eliminated not just enemy personnel, but also the heavy weapons and ammunition that had been supporting their coordinated assault, significantly degrading Taliban offensive capability. Enemy communications intercepted by intelligence specialists revealed growing frustration and tactical confusion among Taliban commanders as their carefully planned operation encountered more effective air support than they had anticipated. The sophisticated ambush that should have resulted in devastating American casualties was instead turning into a costly failure that was depleting their own combat strength. Lightning, Viper 6, northern positions neutralized. Enemy assault from that sector has been broken. You've given us exactly what we needed to maintain perimeter integrity. Outstanding work under extremely challenging conditions. The praise from the Marine Ground Commander carried special significance, representing recognition from fellow service members whose lives depended on Sarah's continued effectiveness. Her unauthorized mission was achieving exactly the kind of tactical success that validated everything she'd tried to prove about her capabilities during months of forced marginalization. Rodriguez monitored aircraft performance data streaming back to Fallon through secure communication links. His experienced eye tracking fuel consumption, weapons expenditure, and system status indicators that told the story of an aircraft being pushed hard but operating within acceptable parameters. His maintenance expertise allowed him to assess whether Sarah's F-35 could sustain continued high-intensity operations. "That bird is performing flawlessly," Rodriguez announced to the Operations Center staff. "All systems nominal, fuel sufficient for extended operations, and weapons payload adequate for continued engagement. Captain Mitchell is getting maximum performance from that aircraft under the most demanding possible circumstances." The technical assessment provided reassurance to everyone monitoring Sarah's mission, confirming that her continued effectiveness wasn't being limited by mechanical factors or resource constraints but depended entirely on her ability to maintain tactical superiority over a determined and well-equipped enemy force. Blackwood found himself in the unusual position of hoping for the success of a mission that directly challenged his authority and exposed the fundamental flaws in his leadership approach. The lives of 200 Marines now depended on the combat effectiveness of a pilot he'd marginalized based on political considerations rather than professional competence. The tactical situation display updated with new intelligence showing Taliban forces massing for what appeared to be a final, desperate assault designed to overwhelm the Marine defensive perimeter through coordinated attack from all remaining approach routes simultaneously. The enemy commander was apparently willing to accept massive casualties to achieve tactical victory before additional American reinforcements could arrive. Sarah's fuel and ammunition status remained adequate for continued operations, but the scope of the pending enemy assault would test both her capabilities and those of her aircraft to their absolute limits. Success would require not just technical proficiency in weapons delivery, but also the kind of tactical innovation and risk management that could only come from extensive combat experience. Intelligence analysts tracked enemy movement patterns through a combination of satellite imagery, electronic intercepts, and reports from the Marine Ground Commander, painting a comprehensive picture of Taliban preparations for coordinated assault. The enemy force had reorganized despite significant casualties, demonstrating the kind of tactical resilience that made them dangerous opponents, even when facing superior American technology and training. "Enemy forces are converging on our position from all available approach routes," reported the Marine Ground Commander. "We're facing simultaneous assault from north, east, southwest, and what appears to be a secondary southern approach. This is going to be their main effort to overrun our position." The tactical assessment was sobering in its implications for both the surrounded Marines and Sarah's ability to provide effective support. A four-direction coordinated assault would stretch her aircraft's capabilities beyond normal limits while testing her ability to prioritize targets and manage ammunition expenditure. Under the most demanding possible circumstances, Santos coordinated between multiple communication channels, managing information flow between Sarah, the Marine Ground Forces Higher Headquarters, and the Fallon Operations Center with the expertise that came from years of handling complex military operations. Under extreme pressure, her role had evolved from liaison officer to operational coordinator for a mission that was achieving strategic importance despite its unauthorized origins. The Operations Center staff watched tactical displays with growing appreciation for the magnitude of what Sarah was accomplishing against overwhelming odds. Her performance was demonstrating exactly why she should have been leading advanced training rather than sitting in briefing rooms, validating everything she'd tried to prove about her capabilities through months of systematic marginalization. Sarah's voice filled the Operations Center with another tactical assessment that demonstrated her comprehensive understanding of the evolving battlefield situation. Falcon Base, Lightning 723 observes enemy forces massing for coordinated assault from multiple directions. Ammunition expenditure will be critical. Request confirmation of priority target engagement sequence. The request revealed both tactical professionalism and realistic assessment of resource limitations that would define the next phase of the engagement. Sarah understood that she couldn't engage all enemy formations simultaneously and needed clear guidance about which threats to prioritize to maximize the survival chances of the surrounded Marines. Santos responded immediately with the kind of clear, decisive guidance that enabled effective tactical coordination under extreme pressure. Lightning 723, priority sequence is Northern Approach Heavy Weapons, Eastern Assault Formation, Southwestern Infiltration Route, then Targets of Opportunity. Ground Commander has final authority for immediate threat assessment. The engagement priority established a framework for Sarah's tactical decision-making while maintaining flexibility to respond to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. Her success would depend on maximizing the effectiveness of each weapon's employment while conserving sufficient ordnance to address multiple simultaneous threats. The final Taliban assault began with coordinated mortar fire designed to suppress Marine defensive positions while infantry formations advanced under covering fire from remaining heavy weapons positions. Sarah's tactical display showed enemy movement from four directions simultaneously, representing the kind of complex engagement scenario that pushed both pilot and aircraft capabilities to their absolute limits. Her response would determine whether 200 American Marines survived the next 30 minutes or became casualties of the most sophisticated Taliban ambush operation of the entire Afghan conflict. Everything she'd learned during 15 years of naval aviation service was about to be tested against an enemy force that had planned this engagement with military precision and was willing to accept massive casualties to achieve tactical victory over American forces. The Operations Center at Fallon fell silent as everyone present absorbed the magnitude of what was unfolding in the Afghan mountains, where one pilot flying an unauthorized mission had become the sole barrier between tactical disaster and strategic victory. Sarah's performance in the next few minutes would either validate her decision to risk everything for fellow service members or result in catastrophic failure that would haunt military aviation for generations. The coordinated Taliban assault erupted across the Afghan mountainside with devastating intensity as four separate enemy formations advanced simultaneously toward the surrounded Marine perimeter. Sarah's tactical display illuminated with target indicators, showing approximately 300 fighters moving under cover of mortar fire and coordinated suppressive shooting from concealed heavy weapons positions throughout the valley complex. Her F-35 Lightning II climbed to optimal attack altitude while her targeting systems processed the complex battlefield geometry required to engage Multiple threat axes without endangering friendly forces caught in the center of the coordinated enemy advance. The aircraft's advanced sensors painted a comprehensive picture of enemy dispositions, but the tactical challenge exceeded anything she'd encountered during 15 years of combat aviation. The northern approach showed the heaviest enemy concentration, with Taliban fighters advancing behind makeshift armor and using coordinated fire and movement tactics that demonstrated sophisticated military training. Sarah's weapon systems calculated engagement, parameters for precision strikes that would break up the assault formation while avoiding fratricide against Marines positioned less than 400 meters away. Viper 6, Lightning 723. Commencing engagement sequence. Northern heavy weapons first, then Eastern formation. Maintain current positions and mark any shifts in friendly locations with strobe signals. Her first weapons release sent precision-guided munitions streaking toward Taliban positions with surgical accuracy, the explosions echoing across the mountain valley as enemy heavy weapons positions disappeared in coordinated blasts that shattered the supporting fires sustaining the northern assault. Secondary explosions from ammunition stores created a cascade of destruction that eliminated an entire sector of enemy combat capability. The immediate effect was tactically decisive as the northern Taliban formation wavered under the sudden loss of fire support, their advance faltering as fighters sought cover from continued air attack. Sarah's targeting had been precise enough to eliminate military threats while avoiding civilian casualties among the scattered Afghan settlements that dotted the operational area. Outstanding hit, Lightning. Northern assault broken and withdrawing. Eastern formation still advancing, but slowing down. You've given us breathing space to redistribute our defensive fires. Sarah banked into her second attack run as the Eastern Taliban formation continued their advance despite the destruction visible on the northern approach. These fighters demonstrated the kind of tactical discipline that came from extensive combat experience, maintaining their assault despite knowing they were exposed to devastating air attack. Her weapon system selected appropriate ordnance for engaging personnel in the open while minimizing the risk of collateral damage to friendly forces positioned throughout the defensive perimeter. The targeting solution required split-second timing to catch enemy fighters between covered positions during their movement phases. The second salvo of precision munitions impacted among the Eastern assault formation with effects that were immediately visible through Sarah's targeting sensors. The coordinated advance dissolved into scattered groups of survivors, seeking cover while dragging wounded comrades away from the devastation of American air power applied with surgical precision. Intelligence intercepts revealed growing desperation among Taliban commanders as their carefully planned operation disintegrated under more effective air support than they had anticipated. Enemy communications showed confusion about American capabilities and growing recognition that their assault was failing despite numerical superiority and tactical surprise. The southwestern approach presented different challenges as Taliban infiltration teams attempted to exploit terrain features that provided concealment from air observation while allowing close approach to Marine defensive positions. Sarah's sensors penetrated enemy camouflage efforts, revealing movement patterns that indicated sophisticated understanding of how to minimize exposure to air attack. Her targeting approach shifted to area suppression fires designed to deny enemy access to key terrain features rather than direct engagement of specific targets. The weapon's employment required careful calculation to achieve tactical effect without creating hazards for friendly forces operating in close proximity to the targeted areas. The explosions that followed created an impassable barrier of debris and continuing fires that blocked Taliban infiltration routes while demonstrating the versatility of precision munitions when employed by someone with comprehensive understanding of their tactical applications. Enemy forces attempting to use the southwestern approach found their movement options eliminated by Sarah's strategic weapons placement. Lightning Viper 6. All approach routes showing enemy withdrawal or neutralization. You've broken their coordinated assault and given us tactical initiative. Enemy forces appear to be conducting general withdrawal from contact. The tactical success represented more than immediate battlefield victory. It validated Sarah's decision to risk everything. For fellow service members, who had needed exactly the kind of expert air support that her experience and judgment could provide. Her unauthorized mission had evolved from personal vindication to strategic success that would save American lives and demonstrate the continuing relevance of combat-experienced aviators. The operations center at Naval Air Station Fallon erupted in subdued cheers as staff members absorbed the magnitude of what Sarah had accomplished against overwhelming odds. Her performance had exceeded even optimistic expectations for mission effectiveness, while demonstrating exactly the kind of tactical excellence that should have made her a primary instructor rather than a marginalized observer. Colonel Santos maintained communications with Higher Marine Corps headquarters, providing real-time updates about the tactical situation that were generating intense interest among senior leaders responsible for American forces throughout Afghanistan. Sarah's success was being recognized at levels that transcended normal military hierarchy. Commander Blackwood, Santos said during a brief pause in tactical communications, "I'm receiving direct inquiries from the Marine Corps' Commandant's office about the pilot providing air support to our forces at Chapman. They want complete details about her background, experience, and current assignment status." The implications were clear and potentially career-defining for everyone involved in the situation. Senior Marine Corps leadership was taking personal interest in Sarah's performance, and their evaluation would be based entirely on results rather than procedural compliance or administrative considerations. Blackwood stared at the tactical displays showing the successful conclusion of Sarah's unauthorized mission, his earlier anger replaced by what appeared to be growing comprehension of how completely his personnel decisions had been exposed as fundamentally flawed. He'd marginalized one of the most capable pilots under his command, and that decision was now being evaluated by senior leaders who cared more about tactical effectiveness than bureaucratic authority. Harrison watched the mission's conclusion with expressions that mixed professional admiration with personal introspection about the difference between training competence and combat expertise. His confidence in his own abilities remained intact, but it was being tempered by realistic appreciation for what was required to operate effectively when American lives depended on split-second decisions under extreme pressure. Rodriguez monitored final aircraft performance data with satisfaction that came from seeing excellence finally being allowed to flourish despite administrative obstacles. His maintenance expertise confirmed that Sarah had pushed her F-35 to its limits while keeping all systems within acceptable operational parameters, demonstrating exactly the kind of professional competence that had characterized her entire career. Sarah's voice filled the operations center with her final tactical report from the Chapman area, her transmission reflecting both professional satisfaction and realistic assessment of what had been accomplished. Falcon Base, Lightning 723. Enemy forces have broken contact and are withdrawing from the immediate area. Friendly casualties appear minimal and defensive perimeter remains intact. Mission accomplished. The simple phrase, "mission accomplished," carried profound implications for everyone who had witnessed Sarah's unauthorized flight transform from an act of insubordination into strategic victory that would save American lives and demonstrate the continuing importance of combat-experienced aviators in modern military operations. Intelligence analysts provided final assessments of enemy casualties and tactical effects, confirming that Sarah's precision strikes had eliminated approximately 60% of the Taliban force while destroying most of their heavy weapons and supporting equipment. The sophisticated ambush that should have resulted in devastating American casualties had instead become a costly failure that significantly degraded enemy capabilities throughout the region. The Marine Ground Commander's final transmission summarized the tactical situation with military understatement that barely concealed his appreciation for Sarah's performance. Lightning 723, Viper 6, your air support was decisive in breaking enemy assault and maintaining perimeter integrity. 200 Marines are going home because of your actions today. Outstanding work under the most challenging possible circumstances. The praise from fellow service members whose lives had depended on Sarah's effectiveness carried more weight than any official recognition or administrative approval. Her unauthorized mission had achieved exactly what she'd intended, demonstrating that merit and dedication could triumph over politics and procedural orthodoxy when American lives hung in the balance. Sarah's return flight to Fallon provided time for reflection on what had transpired and what consequences might follow her decision to risk everything for fellow service members she'd never met. Her fuel status remained adequate for normal return. Procedures, but she understood that landing would bring her face to face with administrative and legal consequences that could end her military career. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly below her aircraft as she crossed back into American airspace, the familiar landscape providing stark contrast to the Afghan mountains where she'd just conducted the most important mission of her career. The transition from combat operations to peacetime procedures felt surreal after the intensity of the Chapman engagement. Her radio crackled with approach control instructions that seemed almost mundane after coordinating close air support for Marines fighting for their lives. The normal peacetime protocols felt disconnected from the life-and-death tactical realities she'd just experienced, highlighting the gap between training exercises and actual combat operations. Naval Air Station Fallon appeared ahead with its orderly rows of aircraft and precisely maintained facilities representing the institutional military that had attempted to marginalize her despite her demonstrated competence. The base looked exactly the same as when she departed, unauthorized several hours earlier. But Sarah understood that everything had changed regardless of external appearances. The landing approach felt routine, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had preceded it, her aircraft responding to familiar procedures with the reliability that had characterized the entire mission. The F-35 touched down with normal precision. But Sarah knew she was landing into a situation that would determine whether her career ended in disgrace or vindication. Ground personnel directed her to a parking area where a crowd had gathered, their expressions ranging from professional curiosity to obvious admiration for what she'd accomplished. Among them stood Admiral Rebecca Walsh, whose presence indicated that senior Navy leadership was taking personal interest in the situation and its implications for military aviation policy. Sarah completed shutdown procedures with deliberate care, understanding that this might be her final moments as an active-duty naval aviator, regardless of her tactical success at Chapman. The familiar routine of post-flight checks provided temporary refuge from contemplating consequences that could range from court-martial to commendation, depending on how senior leadership chose to interpret her actions. Admiral Walsh approached. As Sarah climbed down from the cockpit, her expression unreadable, but her presence indicating that decisions about Sarah's future would be made at the highest levels of naval aviation leadership. The Admiral's reputation for fairness and results-oriented leadership provided hope that merit might triumph over procedural considerations. "Captain Mitchell," Admiral Walsh said, her voice carrying the authority that came from decades of distinguished naval service, "I've been monitoring your mission through Marine Corps' channels, and I've received direct communication from the Commandant expressing appreciation for your actions in saving American lives today." The words provided immediate relief from fears about court-martial or career-ending disciplinary action. But Sarah understood that official recognition would depend on comprehensive review of both her tactical performance and the circumstances that had led to her unauthorized mission. Commander Hayes had arrived from her new assignment as the Top Gun program's deputy director, her presence suggesting that changes in leadership were already being implemented in response to the Chapman crisis and its exposure of fundamental flaws in current personnel management practices. Captain Mitchell, Hayes said with professional warmth that contrasted sharply with Blackwood's dismissive attitude. I've reviewed your complete service record and combat performance history. I want you to know that you'll be receiving the assignment and recognition that your qualifications deserve, effective immediately. The promise of appropriate recognition represented everything Sarah had hoped to achieve through months of patient endurance, followed by decisive action when fellow service members needed her capabilities. Her unauthorized mission had succeeded, not just tactically but strategically enforcing institutional recognition of merit over politics. Blackwood stood at the edge of the crowd, his earlier anger replaced by what appeared to be resignation, as he absorbed the magnitude of how completely his leadership approach had been discredited by the Chapman crisis. His marginalization of Sarah had been exposed as fundamentally wrong by tactical realities that demanded exactly the kind of experience and judgment she possessed. The investigation that followed would reveal systematic patterns of personnel mismanagement that had affected numerous capable aviators beyond Sarah's specific situation. Blackwood's career effectively ended not through dramatic confrontation, but through quiet reassignment to administrative duties that reflected his actual capabilities rather than his political connections. Rodriguez approached with aircraft maintenance records that documented the flawless performance of Sarah's F-35 throughout the demanding mission, his satisfaction evident as he witnessed institutional recognition of excellence that he'd supported. Despite bureaucratic obstacles, his endorsement had proven crucial in enabling Sarah's mission and validating her technical competence. 3 months later, Sarah stood before a new class of Top Gun students as their primary instructor, her assignment reflecting institutional recognition that combat experience and demonstrated judgment were more valuable than political compliance and bureaucratic conformity. Her unauthorized mission had become a case study in tactical decision-making under extreme pressure. The students gathered around her included Harrison, whose attitude had shifted from arrogant dismissal to respectful attention as he recognized the gap between training competence and combat expertise. His development as an aviator would benefit from learning from someone who'd proven her capabilities when American lives depended on split-second decisions. The briefing room where Sarah had once sat as an unwelcome observer now hosted her advanced tactical instruction sessions, the same space transformed by institutional recognition of her worth and capabilities. Her teaching drew from real combat experience rather than theoretical knowledge, providing students with insights that could only come from someone who'd faced life-and-death pressure. Admiral Walsh's investigation had resulted in comprehensive changes to personnel evaluation and assignment procedures throughout naval aviation, ensuring that future decisions would be based on demonstrated competence rather than political considerations. Sarah's unauthorized mission had catalyzed institutional reforms that would benefit numerous capable aviators. The Chapman rescue had become legendary within Marine Corps and naval aviation communities, representing the kind of tactical excellence and personal courage that defined the best traditions of American military service. Sarah's decision to risk everything for fellow service members had validated the principle that merit and dedication could triumph over bureaucratic obstacles when lives hung in the balance. Her story served as inspiration for anyone who had ever been overlooked, underestimated, or marginalized by systems that valued conformity over competence. Sometimes the most powerful response to injustice was simply demonstrating excellence when excellence was needed most, regardless of official authorization or bureaucratic approval. The F-35 Lightning II that had carried Sarah to Chapman now bore mission markers commemorating the successful rescue of 200 Marines, its significance extending far beyond normal aircraft assignment. The machine had become a symbol of what could be accomplished when exceptional pilots were finally allowed to demonstrate their capabilities without artificial limitations. Sarah's unauthorized flight had evolved from personal vindication to strategic victory that saved American lives and demonstrated the continuing importance of combat-experienced aviators in modern military operations. Her decision to act when action was needed had proven that sometimes the greatest military achievements required the courage to exceed official authority in service of higher principles. The Nevada sun set over Fallon exactly as it had on the morning when Sarah made her fateful decision to risk everything for fellow service members in danger. The landscape remained unchanged, but the institutional recognition of merit over politics represented a transformation that would benefit military aviation for generations to come. For anyone who has ever faced systematic marginalization despite proven competence, Sarah's story demonstrates that excellence ultimately prevails when given the opportunity to flourish. Her unauthorized mission proved that the most important military victories sometimes require the courage to act beyond official authorization when American lives depend on capabilities that bureaucracy fails to recognize or value appropriately. The legacy of Chapman would continue inspiring aviators who understood that their highest obligation was to fellow service members who depended on their skills and dedication, regardless of bureaucratic obstacles or political considerations that might attempt to prevent them from serving at their highest capabilities. The Pentagon briefing room fell silent as Admiral Rebecca Walsh concluded her presentation to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the assembled military leadership absorbing the implications of what had transpired at Forward Operating Base Chapman and its aftermath throughout the naval aviation community. The unauthorized mission that had begun as an act of individual defiance had evolved into a case study that would reshape personnel policies across all service branches. General Patricia Morrison, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, studied the tactical analysis with the focused attention of someone who understood that institutional failures could cost American lives in ways that extended far beyond individual cases. The Chapman incident represented more than successful crisis response. It exposed systematic problems in how the military identified, developed, and utilized its most capable personnel. Admiral Walsh, General Morrison said, her voice carrying the authority that came from 4 decades of distinguished military service, your investigation reveals patterns that extend beyond naval aviation. We need comprehensive review of personnel management practices throughout the Department of Defense to ensure we're maximizing our human capital rather than squandering it through bureaucratic dysfunction. The directive represented institutional recognition that Sarah's experience wasn't unique, but symptomatic of broader problems that affected talented personnel across all military specialties. Her unauthorized mission had catalyzed reforms that would benefit thousands of service members whose capabilities had been underutilized due to political considerations rather than merit-based evaluation. 6 months after Chapman, Sarah found herself addressing the annual Naval Aviation Symposium as the keynote speaker, her presence representing dramatic transformation from marginalized observer to recognized authority on combat aviation tactics and personnel development. The audience included senior officers from throughout the aviation community, many of whom had followed her story with professional interest. "Excellence doesn't require permission," Sarah began, her words carrying the weight of experience earned through years of systematic marginalization, followed by vindication under the most demanding possible circumstances. But excellence does require courage, the courage to act when action is needed, regardless of bureaucratic obstacles or political considerations that might attempt to prevent us from serving at our highest capabilities. The symposium audience responded with sustained applause that reflected widespread recognition of how completely Sarah's unauthorized mission had validated the principle that merit should triumph over politics when American lives hung in the balance. Her transformation from overlooked pilot to respected leader had become symbolic of institutional change throughout military aviation. The investigation that followed Chapman had revealed disturbing patterns of personnel mismanagement that extended far beyond Blackwood-specific decisions. Dozens of capable aviators had been marginalized through similar combinations of political considerations and bureaucratic dysfunction, their talents wasted while less qualified personnel received advancement and recognition. Commander Hayes, now directing the reformed Top Gun program, had implemented comprehensive changes that emphasized combat experience and demonstrated competence over political compliance and administrative conformity. The new selection criteria ensured that future students would learn from instructors who possessed genuine tactical expertise rather than bureaucratic favor. Captain Mitchell, Hayes announced during the symposium, will be leading our new Advanced Combat Tactics curriculum, drawing directly from her operational experience to provide students with insights that can only come from someone who's faced life and death pressure in actual combat environments. The appointment represented institutional recognition that real-world experience was more valuable than theoretical knowledge when preparing aviators for the complex challenges of modern warfare. Sarah's curriculum would emphasize tactical decision-making under pressure, drawing from lessons learned during years of combat operations rather than classroom theory. Harrison approached Sarah after her presentation, his expression reflecting genuine respect that had replaced his earlier arrogant dismissal. His development as an aviator had benefited enormously from learning from someone who'd proven her capabilities when fellow service members depended on split-second tactical decisions. "Ma'am," Harrison said with humility that marked his transformation from privileged favorite to dedicated professional, "I want you to know that your instruction has made me a better pilot and a better officer. I understand now what I was missing. During my earlier training, the difference between knowing procedures and understanding warfare." The acknowledgement represented more than personal growth. It demonstrated how institutional changes, inspired by Sarah's experience, were producing better prepared aviators throughout the naval aviation community. Her influence extended beyond individual students to reshape how the entire training system approached combat preparation. Rodriguez had been promoted to Senior Master Chief and assigned as Maintenance Director for the reformed Top Gun program. His role expanded to ensure that aircraft performance matched the enhanced tactical training that Sarah and her colleagues were providing. His decades of experience had proven crucial in supporting aviators who pushed their aircraft to operational limits. Captain Mitchell's aircraft always return in perfect condition, Rodriguez observed to visiting dignitaries, because she understands that taking care of the machine is part of taking care of the mission. Her students learn that excellence in aviation requires attention to every detail, from pre-flight inspection to post-mission analysis. The Marine Corps had officially recognized Sarah's Chapman rescue with the Distinguished Flying Cross, but more importantly, they had incorporated her tactical innovations into standard operating procedures for close air support operations throughout Afghanistan and other combat zones. Her unauthorized mission had produced lasting tactical improvements that would benefit American forces for years to come. Colonel Santos, promoted to Brigadier General, now served as Deputy Commandant for Aviation, her elevation reflecting institutional recognition that her advocacy for merit-based personnel decisions had proven strategically valuable. Her support for Sarah during the Chapman crisis had demonstrated the kind of courageous leadership that the military needed at all levels. The Chapman rescue represents everything right about American military aviation, General Santos declared during her promotion ceremony. When we allow our most capable personnel to serve without artificial limitations imposed by bureaucratic considerations. Captain Mitchell's actions saved 200 Marine lives and reminded us what's possible when excellence is finally allowed to flourish. The reforms inspired by Sarah's experience had been implemented throughout the Department of Defense, creating new mechanisms for identifying and developing exceptional personnel, while preventing the kind of systematic marginalization that had characterized her pre-Chapman experience. The changes would benefit thousands of service members whose talents had been underutilized. Admiral Walsh had been selected for promotion to Chief of Naval Operations, her leadership during the post-Chapman reforms, demonstrating exactly the kind of institutional thinking that modern military challenges required. Her personnel policies emphasized results over relationships, ensuring that future advancement would be based on demonstrated competence rather than political connections. Military effectiveness depends entirely on our ability to identify, develop, and properly utilize our most capable personnel. Admiral Walsh explained during her confirmation hearing before the Senate Armed Services Committee. The Chapman incident taught us that bureaucratic dysfunction can literally cost American lives when we fail to recognize excellence or allow political considerations to override merit-based decision-making. The congressional testimony provided national visibility for the institutional changes that Sarah's unauthorized mission had catalyzed, ensuring that lessons learned from her experience would influence military personnel policies at the highest levels of government. Her individual act of courage had produced systemic improvements that would strengthen American military effectiveness. The Taliban commander who had planned the Chapman ambush was killed 6 months later during a subsequent operation. Intelligence reports confirming that the devastating failure of his sophisticated assault had severely damaged his reputation among extremist networks. Sarah's precision strikes had eliminated not just immediate threats, but also strategic enemy capabilities. Throughout the region, intelligence assessments revealed that the Chapman rescue had significant psychological effects throughout Taliban networks, demonstrating American air power capabilities that exceeded enemy expectations and undermining confidence in their ability to successfully ambush well-supported American forces. Sarah's tactical success had achieved strategic effects that extended far beyond immediate battlefield victory. 2 years after Chapman, Sarah stood before her latest class of Top Gun students in the same briefing room where she had once been. An unwelcome observer, her transformation from marginalized pilot to respected instructor, representing institutional recognition of merit over politics. The new students included aviators from throughout the military aviation community, all eager to learn from someone who'd proven her capabilities under the most demanding circumstances. Combat aviation is about more than technical proficiency. Sarah explained to the assembled students, her lesson plan drawn from real operational experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Success requires the judgment to make correct decisions under extreme pressure, the courage to act when action is needed, and the professional dedication to continuously improve your capabilities, regardless of bureaucratic obstacles. Her teaching philosophy emphasized practical application over academic theory, ensuring that students understood the difference between classroom knowledge and combat effectiveness. The curriculum included detailed analysis of the Chapman operation, providing insights into tactical decision-making that could only come from someone who'd actually faced life-and-death pressure. Lieutenant Commander Ashley Park, one of Sarah's current students, represented the new generation of aviators who would benefit from institutional changes inspired by the Chapman rescue. Park's selection for Top Gun training was based entirely on demonstrated competence and combat experience, rather than political considerations or administrative favor. Captain Mitchell's instruction has completely changed how I think about tactical aviation, Park explained during a program evaluation. She teaches us to understand warfare rather than just memorize procedures, and her experience provides insights that you can't get from textbooks or training exercises. The student feedback reflected broader improvements in training quality that resulted from emphasizing real experience over theoretical knowledge in instructor selection. Sarah's success had demonstrated the value of combat-proven educators in co-instructors in preparing aviators for the complex challenges of modern warfare. The F-35 Lightning II that Sarah had flown to Chapman now served as a training aircraft for her advanced tactical courses, its mission history providing tangible connection between classroom instruction and operational reality. Students understood that they were flying the same aircraft that had saved 200 American lives through precision, employment of air power under extreme conditions. Rodriguez ensured that the historic aircraft received meticulous maintenance that preserved its operational capabilities while honoring its significance as a symbol of what could be accomplished when exceptional pilots were allowed to demonstrate their abilities without artificial limitations. The machine represented the intersection of technological capability and human excellence that defined the best of American military aviation. The Pentagon had commissioned a comprehensive study of the Chapman operation for inclusion in professional military education curricula throughout the Department of Defense, ensuring that lessons learned from Sarah's experience would benefit future generations of military leaders. Her unauthorized mission had become required reading for students at the Naval War College, Air Force Academy, and other professional development institutions. General Morrison had personally endorsed the study's conclusions, emphasizing that military effectiveness required institutional cultures that rewarded merit and encouraged decisive action when American lives hung in the balance. The Chapman case study provided concrete examples of how bureaucratic dysfunction could be overcome through courageous leadership at all levels. Captain Mitchell's actions at Chapman represent the best traditions of American military service. General Morrison wrote in the study's foreword, demonstrating that excellence ultimately prevails when individuals possess the courage to act beyond official authorization in service of higher principles. Her decision to risk everything for fellow service members validates the fundamental values that define our military profession. The institutional recognition extended beyond military circles to inspire civilians who faced similar challenges in corporate, academic, and other professional environments where merit was sometimes subordinated to political considerations. Sarah's story had become a case study in leadership programs throughout American business schools and management training curricula. 5 years after Chapman, Sarah received promotion to captain and assignment as deputy commander of the Naval Strike and Air Warfare Center. Her advancement reflecting institutional recognition that her experience and judgment were valuable at the highest levels of military aviation leadership. Her new position would allow her to influence policy development and training standards throughout the naval aviation community. The promotion ceremony took place at the same Fallon facility where her unauthorized mission had begun, the symbolism deliberate and meaningful for everyone who had witnessed her transformation from marginalized observer to recognized leader. Admiral Walsh personally administered the oath, emphasizing the connection between individual courage and institutional improvement. Captain Mitchell's career demonstrates that excellence eventually prevails when supported by institutional courage. Admiral Walsh declared during the ceremony, and her continued service ensures that future generations of aviators will benefit from lessons learned through her experience and dedication. The celebration included personnel from throughout the naval aviation community, many of whom had been influenced by institutional changes that Sarah's Chapman mission had catalyzed. Their presence reflected widespread appreciation for how completely her unauthorized flight had validated the principle that merit should triumph over politics when American lives depended on professional competence. Master Chief Rodriguez, now approaching retirement after 28 years of distinguished service, had requested assignment to Sarah's staff as his final tour, wanting to conclude his career by supporting the kind of excellence he'd advocated throughout decades of military service. His presence provided continuity between the old system and the reformed institutions that Chapman had inspired. Working with Captain Mitchell has been the highlight of my career, Rodriguez explained during his retirement ceremony, because she represents everything right about military aviation when bureaucratic obstacles are removed and excellence is allowed to flourish. Her success proves that merit ultimately prevails when supported by institutional courage. The Chapman Rescue had achieved permanent recognition through naming of a new training facility at Fallon in honor of the 200 Marines whose lives Sarah had saved through her unauthorized mission. The facility would serve as a lasting reminder that individual courage could produce institutional change when principles mattered more than procedures. Sarah's legacy extended beyond personal vindication to encompass systemic improvements that would benefit thousands of future service members whose talents might otherwise be wasted through bureaucratic dysfunction or political considerations. Her decision to risk everything for fellow Americans had produced lasting reforms that strengthened military effectiveness throughout the Department of Defense. The lessons of Chapman continued resonating throughout military professional development curricula, ensuring that future leaders understood the importance of recognizing and supporting excellence regardless of bureaucratic obstacles. Sarah's unauthorized mission had become a permanent part of American military heritage, inspiring generations of service members to prioritize mission accomplishment and troop welfare over political considerations. Her story served as proof that individual acts of courage could produce institutional transformation when supported by leaders who possess the moral strength to recognize excellence and implement necessary changes. The Chapman Rescue demonstrated that sometimes the most important military achievements required the wisdom to exceed official authority in service of higher principles that define the best traditions of American military service. Standing before the memorial dedicated to the Chapman Rescue, Sarah reflected on how completely her unauthorized mission had transformed both her career and the institutional culture that had once marginalized her capabilities. The bronze plaque commemorating the rescue bore simple words that captured everything important about military service. Excellence requires courage, and courage requires character. For anyone who has ever faced systematic marginalization despite proven competence, Sarah's journey from overlooked pilot to respected leader proves that merit ultimately prevails when individuals possess the courage to act decisively when action is needed most. Her legacy continues inspiring service members who understand that their highest obligation is to fellow Americans who depend on their skills and dedication, regardless of bureaucratic obstacles that might attempt to prevent them from serving at their maximum capabilities. The Nevada sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors that seemed to celebrate everything Sarah had accomplished through years of patient endurance, followed by decisive action when fellow service members needed her expertise most. Her unauthorized flight to Chapman had proven that the most powerful response to institutional injustice was simply demonstrating excellence when excellence was needed most, regardless of official permission or bureaucratic approval. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.